Hi, very warm welcome to all our viewers. Today we are at the career fair, which is a virtual career fair being organized by WiT-ACE. And with me, I have an esteemed panel, and I'm going to begin by introducing the three of them. But first things first, what we are discussing or what we hope to discuss threadbare with the three of them is the topic of today's panel discussion is defining the new talent mindscape. The new talent landscape, mindsets, attitude, and skills. I have with me Sunita Cherian, who has been with Wipro for more than 25 years. She is the Chief Culture Officer. As per Sunita, given that she's been with, HR and Wipro, while she started off in sales, there is no facet of HR that Sunita has not dabbled in. So everything from organizational transformation to building culture, to comp and ben, she of course started off doing sales. So Sunita, a very, very warm welcome to the show. She has been at the forefront of driving culture change at Wipro. I'm sure everyone knows because Wipro is one of our leading lights. So Wipro operates in more than 65 countries with more than 200,000 employees. So she is the person in the chair, in the hot seat, trying to bring about cultural change for those 200,000 employees. So Sunita, very, very warm welcome.
Thank you, Aniruddha. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Next, I move to Ramesh Mitragotri. He is the CHRO, or the Chief Human Resources Officer for UltraTech Cement, the country's largest cement manufacturer producer. He's been in this role for the last 5 years. Ramesh has been with Aditya Birla Group across a bunch of leadership positions, including being head of Aditya Birla Retail. So he's been with them for more than 14 years. He's also worked for had a very, very long stint in Philips for more than 10 years. And outside of HR, just given his long career, which started as early as 1986, he's dabbled in a few things which have been beyond HR as well. Goes without saying that, like Sunita, just given the sheer number of years of experience, there is probably no facet of HR that he's not done. And as he said, it's popular HR jargon. What he currently leads is, cultural transformation, HR transformation. These are, of course, common HR lingos, as all of us know. So Ramesh, a very, very warm welcome to this panel discussion.
Thanks, Aniruddha. Pleasure to be here.
Finally, I come to a gentleman who calls himself Mishra. He is currently based out of Dubai. Again, there is probably a whole host of things that Debu has done in his life. Started off in advertising. Then, if I heard him right, he's done some television. He's been an investigative journalist. I guess for most of his life he's been a consultant. A consultant, and then of course an HR consultant. Having worked with a bunch of organizations, I think his longest stint was with Aon Hewitt. So he was the principal, consulting officer in the Middle East for Aon Hewitt. He's been with the Hay Group. He's been with Deloitte as a partner. And right now he wears a bunch of roles. So he's first of all an entrepreneur. And today currently he's dabbling in HR tech. He sits on the board of a number of companies. He advises several boards. He's also associated with a bunch of tribals in India, and he's helping them market their coffee. Currently, he heads up an organization. He calls himself the co-founder and the chief evangelist of MyCareerDynamics. It's extremely interesting because it appears that the goal of this organization is to help people find career happiness. And that, he claims, is based on 40 years of research. I have had, while Debu and I are probably speaking for the first time today, but I have some common friends, and I hope not to embarrass neither Debu nor our audience, but I have an interesting insight in Debu. There are three things that he loves, he does with aplomb. One is coffee, another is cocktails, and the third is conversations. And this friend of mine who's actually started an HR startup, of which Debu is on the board. So Debu, I'm giving you indirectly the name. He says, one of the best consultancies ever come across. So Debu, a very, very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. So I think we've probably eaten up a fair amount of our time with the introductions. But coming now to the very first question that we had, which is, has the talent landscape sort of changed over the years? Because today, all of us realize that we are in the digital world, right? We keep talking about being technology-led in the digital world. So given, the sheer experience that all of you bring to the table, and maybe I will begin with you, Ramesh, what is your opinion, in terms of how has the talent landscape changed? I mean, India always did have engineers. There were always MBAs, right? And today we claim we are in the digital space, technology-led. How has the talent landscape changed? What has been your experience? Let's begin with you, Ramesh.
Aniruddha, actually, there are three primary factors on why we would say that has changed. One is the demographics itself. Second is the economy, the way things have changed, the way things have changed or evolved over the years. And third is about the expectation from the talent itself, how talent viewed themselves in the industry or at work some years ago and now. So, on the demographic front, we all know how things have changed. More women in the workforce, large number of younger people available in the workforce. That itself has changed, primarily what's required. Now, coming to the specific part that you said about, they were always engineers and they were always MBAs. I think the outlook, perhaps, management education itself, when I studied management, we studied in India, we studied more about how you work in a licensed era. And by the time we actually started working, everything had begun changing. The whole profile in 5 years, completely the landscape had changed by the time we were working. So management education has also changed quite a bit. Engineering has become much more, although you specialize in an area, it's become much more broad-based, right? I think people come with more stronger analytical skills. Everybody today has basic, I would say digital skills. There was an era where the entire, IT, when it moved in the early days from EDP, what was called as EDP to IT and whatever, metamorphosis that happened in the technology sector. I think there itself a large number of people had to be trained to be able to get familiar. Today, that basic is almost a hygiene. It comes with that. And coming to the third part of, the expectation from talent itself, the younger talent today is far more different. They are, if I put it a bit crudely, it's about instant gratification. Everybody would want to see, they work with a very sharp outcome in mind. They want to get to results fast. So the whole thing is focused. Sometimes it builds a better drive in being able to do. And that also has a different thing. There was an era when loyalty was valued. People staying stable and continuing with the organization versus today, innovation, and speed at which people bring change. I think that's more value today. And you also have budding entrepreneurs coming from the campuses today, which was not the case at all even couple of decades ago. Today, you see a large number of them almost start with startups starting from the campus days. All of that has put a different outlook both to the talent that is there and the way industry now needs to or has been looking at talent. So it has indeed, to answer that question of saying, how has it changed? This is what I see primarily.
Thank you very much. I think that was very incisive. Sunita, I'm going to come straight to you, given your role as the Chief Culture Officer and the fact that you're a woman on our panel today. I'll just pick on what Ramesh just said, and these are the points that hit me. First thing he said is that expectations have changed, which means even at an organizational level, since in a sense you represent Wipro or the organization, he's saying, that expectation has changed. Then he's saying that, the quality of both engineering education as well as MBA education has been enhanced. It has improved. People are far more digitally savvy. Third, he said there are far many more women in the workforce, right, than at the time when, let's say, he probably began his career. And the final thing that he mentioned is that, while organizations may have a different expectations or a higher level of expectation, the fact remains that the employees themselves, they are also looking for faster outcomes and faster gratification. Now, my question to you, a little pointed, is that only for themselves? What has been your take, given you're responsible for 200,000 employees across the globe?
Sure. No, and I just feel there's one more aspect, Ramesh, to what you spoke about, which is what the COVID has really done. In terms of just the remote working, I think that's an important piece which I think all organizations have to figure out. Because come to think of it, forget the demographics for a minute. Just the fact that your students who are coming out of colleges now have actually been studying for 2 years in a remote environment. Projects have happened, exams have happened, collaboration has happened. So just look at the environment in which these freshers are actually joining corporates. In such kind of a mind space, if the corporates are talking about, you got to come to the office every single day, you got to swipe in and swipe out, and that's not a world that they are comfortable with anymore, because the pandemic has completely changed that attitude to responding to what the corporate really should deliver on. As far as expectations from the corporate is concerned, Aniruddha, I would say that those expectations in my mind has remained the same, because it is about how do you address your clients' needs? How do you collaborate to have better innovations so that you're able to respond to those clients' needs better, faster, cheaper? So I think those expectations have not changed. Probably it is in this frame, which is a little different today, of expectations of a remote vis-a-vis an organization which probably cannot give you 100% remote, because obviously the fear is there in terms of what happens to my culture, right? And even today I'm grappling with it, because we have almost 70,000 odd employees who actually joined us during the pandemic. So that's the kind of churn that we're talking about, who've never ever experienced what it means to walk into a Wipro office, who've really never experienced those coffee conversations, who've really never experienced what it is to, fail at the same time, get pointed out by your colleagues, learn fast, move ahead. So those are things which are important, and that's a nugget one should not lose out. So I think prima facie, the expectation that yes, this is the client expectation and this is what you will deliver, I don't think that has changed, but the mindsets have definitely taken a sharp turn, for sure. And coming to the topic on gender, I would completely agree with Ramesh. It's not that we didn't have women who were graduating from engineering colleges or MBA colleges in the past, but just the sheer fact that they are a lot more ambitious, they are a lot more hungry to make both work, because it is a fluid state, work and life. So I don't think those partitions of this is work and this is life has meaning anymore. And most of them have grown up with a surrounding where they've probably seen their parents also juggling this work life. So I think the number of women who are graduating and the number of women who have it in them to go the long hog is definitely far more than what we experienced many years ago. So clearly the demographics will certainly change as a result of more women entering the workforce, more women staying in the workforce, more importantly, and moving on to positions of leadership, which will really change the game.
Thank you, Sunita. Those were incisive comments as well. Debu, I'm going to come to you next because your several roles and several hats notwithstanding, I think your career pretty much defines you more as a consultant, and therefore you have the, probably the opportunity of having seen so many organizations. So, at the time when, we were starting our career, I mean, and this was probably more HR initially, but, experienced line people would agree. We always said that, attitude is the most important because, at the end of the day, knowledge is something that one can pick up and skills can be imparted, right? Now, but in today's, again, digital age, right, where there are organizations have different expectations. Ramesh spoke about the instant gratification, culture that today's new gen brings to the table. So in that scenario, when we are looking at talent landscape, and I'm sure each of you in your roles are looking, evaluating, talent day in and day out. Has it really changed, or does attitude still, we said, defining the new talent landscape, so mindset, attitude, and skills. So does attitude still, is it still the most important thing, and if so, why so, and if not, then why not?
It's quite interesting that if I take a leaf out of what Ramesh talked about or what Sunita mentioned, you look at the COVID crisis, and Sunita touched upon a brilliant piece about what it has done. I think the COVID crisis has given everybody a taste to the world of women, because where the home and work collides and you have to balance it out. So the COVID crisis taught everybody how difficult it is. And I hope and I wish that appreciation for the challenges that women face in the workplace is now well established for everyone. But when you look at the talent landscape and based on the research that Decision Dynamics has, historically, we have always had 4 kinds of career trajectories. And I'll just talk about that briefly. So one is the expert career trajectory, that you focus on stability and long term, and therefore you dive deep into a particular domain or an area and build expertise. So that's one kind of mindset that you have. Then you have the linear career trajectory, so which is aspiring to higher and higher positions of authority or responsibility, which therefore driven towards progression. And that's again one kind of mindset which has always existed, which is more stereotypical of Asian or corporate world of rising up the ladder, and that's where the term career ladder comes from. Then there is a spiral trajectory, which is moving into related areas of work. You talked about your experience from banking to retail, but in the human resources domain. So that's kind of a spiral trajectory. Or Ramesh talked about, branding experience, which is not related, which brings me to the 4th trajectory, which is transitory, that you move into unrelated areas and very quickly. Now, the moment you start thinking of these 4 career trajectories, they have always existed. But now with the startup world, with digital, with all the crises that the youngsters or the younger lot is experiencing, the transitory and spiral trajectories are becoming front and center. And just to borrow a leaf out of the world of neuroscience, you asked about attitude and knowledge and skills. Our attitude, knowledge, and skills have one distinction. So attitude is built upon what I get to experience, and therefore the worldview I build, saying that this is acceptable and this is not. That's purely built upon our experiences. So the limited our experiences, the limited will be our worldview, and that defines an attitude. Where knowledge and skills is whatever is taught to you by a middleman who's the teacher or educator who tells you that this is how the world operates. And once you have the mix of these three and you come into the real world of work or life, you tend to test those hypotheses saying that, what I was taught was, does it hold true? Or what I thought the world was, is it really that world that I'm entering? And we shape our journey after that. What we are seeing is that youth have much more access to the worldview given their digital lifestyles than probably us who believe that we have already got all the experience under our belt. So they are likely to be more open, and they are also seeing success stories around them, which shapes their perception that this is a good enough way to live, which is to change quickly, to look for gratification because it is acceptable. That's a normal way of life. So we are talking about two different sets, us looking at the youth saying that they seek instant gratification, and the youth saying, but that's the way of life. You guys don't understand us. And I'll just point out one aspect of human resources, which is, let's say, performance feedback. Now, in a world where everybody is seeking that blue tick in their WhatsApp message, saying that whether it has been read or not, and if read, why hasn't the person responded? Imagine receiving performance feedback at the end of the cycle when the Earth completes a revolution around the sun, which defines 1 year. You see that, dissonance between the two. I'm used to a life of instant feedback. And here in HR, you're telling me that I'll tell you at the end of the year how you did. So I think that's the clash of, expectation versus reality, which is what is defining the talent landscape right now.
Debu, that's very, very useful. In fact, the last part of what you said about traditional HR methods of giving, feedback at the end. I mean, I guess you being a consultant and of course, Sunita being from the IT world, I think in many organizations, perhaps a little more progressive ones, but again, progressive could be debatable. Organizations have moved where, you work on a project and at the end of the project, you get evaluated. And that is really your appraisal. And then you move on to the next one. So I think, organizations are in transition. It's not that every organization can just afford to just move to that model. But I'm sure given your consulting background, you would have seen that several organizations over the years have slowly started moving there. And I don't know whether it has happened because of the push that they've got back from their employees. And today, these are employees who are in the digital age. So, but that's been one of my observations, even in my HR career. So let's look at mindsets because, again, commonsensically, given today's youngsters, given that they come far better equipped in certain areas, we would like to believe that, mindset is perhaps the most important or the defining piece among skills, attitudes. Because again, you said attitude is finally a function of what experience you have imbibed. If for whatever reason that experience is limited or has been of a particular kind, then you can't really actually blame that individual for having the attitude that he or she brings to the table. That's my sort of inference from what you mentioned to me, right? So coming to that, I would like to hear from both Ramesh and from Sunita, given that they operate in very, very diverse environments. One is a manufacturing industry, the other is IT. What has been your take on mindsets? Has it really changed, both from the employer perspective as well as from an employee perspective? And I would be particularly interested in trying to understand the differences between a manufacturing setup and an IT setup. So if I may come to you, Ramesh.
Sure. I think looking at how, if I consider decades as time periods to look at, has the mindset changed? Yeah, indeed it has changed. I think we've come into a highly competitive work environment, competing not merely from the same industry that you're in, but competing with industries that did not perhaps exist long ago. So all of that is happening, and every kind of a business is facing it. So organizational mindsets, or I would say the people, the leadership that runs the organizations, also there is a shift in the mindset and shift in, of course, the mindset of the talent that comes in. to be precise, what is it? It's about growth, competitiveness, experimenting, innovation as a part of it. So all of these have become foundations and basic expectations from each of these. I think the response to pandemic, I think Sunita brought up, that right point, because that's the big thing facing today. What perhaps the responses that we saw in has shaped up how organizations are going to now take forward from here on. And we also are seeing a big shift in the way employees now look at employment itself as a basis. There's a talk of great resignation, particularly in the Western world, and India is also beginning to see some parts of it happening in. And the workforce indeed has become very different than what we have known perhaps in the last several years that we've been around. All of this, yes, there is a shift in mindset. There is a need to respond to each one of these as organizations and be prepared for what's coming, because we had a long time periods to plan for and make changes. It's no longer now that's true. The shifts will keep happening at a very rapid pace, and organizations will need to be prepared to move on that front.
Thank you very much. Sunita, what's your take? How is it different in an IT setup?
Yeah, so my first point was, I don't think it's very different for a manufacturing setup or an IT setup, because I think expectations of every industry in terms of, because finally there is an end client to whichever industry you're talking about. And as far as the end client is concerned, it is about delivering to the end client expectations, ensuring that you get it right the first time, all the time, right? And the only aspect over here which I would like to emphasize on is, while probably mindsets of both organization and employees, if I were to kind of peel the onion a little bit, in the past, maybe things like ownership or things like, the fact that you were loyal, etc., were very important. But I would say today it is more about how do you really collaborate with each other? How do those innovative ideas really come to the fore? And I think the biggest impediment today, if you ask me, is this tiled faces that we see, right? Because it is limiting, and in a limited space where collaboration is kind of going to be forced, how do you really expect innovation to thrive? And how do you ensure that people and their mindsets are also catering to this need? And I would completely agree with Ramesh, because as far as what one is seeing, choices are aplenty today, right? So people have choices. If you expect XYZ from me and my mindset is not in the same direction, then there are other organizations which are willing to listen to or take cognizance of my needs and cater to them. So you will see the rise of gig workers because they feel that they have the freedom, they have the ability to spend their time the way they want to spend their time. They will not be boxed. So I think these mindsets are important for us to follow, and which is exactly why we're trying to focus on the culture aspect of it, because culture is nothing but a mix of all these beliefs and mindsets, etc. You're trying to unpeel and you're trying to ensure that both the organization mindset and that of the employee is in the same space, so that you're really not talking two different things.
All right, thank you, Sunita. I'm just conscious of the time. So we've covered attitudes, we've looked at mindsets. I'm now going to come to Debu with skills, because it's something that we should not leave out. Now, it's commonly being said today that reskilling is the new currency, right? And if you can't reskill yourself, and if you continuously can't reskill, then there is a problem. So my first question to you, Debu, is that, and perhaps there would be a follow-up one, is it limited to just reskilling yourself on the technical skills or on the digital skills? Or does, skill have a wider connotation? Because there could be managerial skills, there could be leadership skills, but why am I preempting those? Debu, over to you.
So see, skill has a very important place in our lives. And we somehow tend to, or the historical approach had been that we somehow picked up skills and then tried to find a vocation which allowed us to practice that skill effectively. Now, what the world has shifted to is that some of those skills are no longer relevant because technology is taking over. So I'll give you a very simple example. So, and I use this quite frequently. The English language skills, so your ability to be able to get the spelling of certain things. And my 7-year-old niece taught me a hack which I was completely blown by. So she doesn't know the spelling of items she wants to order on Amazon. So what she does is that she goes and uses a voice command in YouTube saying balloon, and then copies and pastes that into Amazon, and then she's sorted because then she has no errors and everything is sorted. I believe that the digital skills and stuff which are being talked about right now are probably going to be irrelevant in the future because you will see no-code platforms fine. So your ability to decode the world around you and to find ways of making sense of it is going to be probably the biggest skill that we all should possess. We needed it in the past, we will need it much more in the future. A lot of the tasks and activities which we feel very proud of being able to do today will be taken over by much more productive artificial intelligence, robotics, and other stuff. But what will not be taken away is the inference ability, our ability to inference the situation, to understand emotions, to be able to respond to it, and the willingness to be open to pick up tools that are available and use them. The example of my niece, the willingness to use tools which are not purpose for that, but work perfectly fine. And you will find that the youth are pretty open to that idea. So there was a time when everybody talked about the lingo that they used on WhatsApp chats, because they figured out that the English language is probably weird. It uses stuff which has no relevance, and you can make sense without it. So that I believe the skill of inferring the world around you, and there is a very interesting piece of philosophy which is called the Umwelt, which is the German word means my world. So when you start going beyond your own world and you look at other people's worlds and say that, oh, this is very interesting. And I go back to my earlier piece about experiences. The ability to know how life exists in US and Europe is far greater right now. Earlier, we had to travel to go and experience the culture. Today, Netflix and Amazon Prime and others give us a ringside view of life, culture, and the social norms of those societies. And we suddenly get inspired and say, why not? This sounds interesting. Why not use it? And you'll see that that becomes a part of our daily life. So I think being open to inference is going to be the biggest skill for the future. And I specifically come to the world of women. Our problem with diversity or doing justice to diversity has been because we have always held stereotypical images or notions about what women should do and what men should do. I think that line is blurring, and it's a great opportunity, a great platform being created for women to say that I don't need to stick to those stereotypes. And for others to say that, probably those stereotypes have lived their life and are no longer valid. It will take some time, I agree. It will not happen overnight. But that openness is coming in. I think that's a great opportunity. The one research point that we had from the Decision Dynamics poll is that women are far more open to exploring different models of careers. So they do freelance and gig work. They have been doing that for a very long period of time. So gig or freelance work was forefront in the world of women globally 10 years back. And they would switch careers very easily because for them, that personal development was a big deal. And it is typical of women that they focus a lot on personal development and developing others, which you can only do when you're looking at spiral or transitory career trajectories. So they are well suited for exploration and diversity of experiences. I think organizations also have realized that that's bringing in a lot of value to the enterprise success story as well. That's a fascinating positive aspect of the future of the world at work that I am excited about.
Wonderful, Debu. I think Initially, when you started off, I was a little, scared because you said so many things will sort of go out of the window in terms of career. You're clearly saying among the things that you said, you emphasized a lot about the importance of inference, which means the human head still has, will still continue to have importance. You acknowledge the importance of emotion, which means even as a leader, even in a hardcore tech company or in a manufacturing company, there is scope for the heart, right? Because, the head and the heart. I will, probably ask this question of someone else, is where does that lead guts or courage? Surely that is also an important sort of skill to have. But definitely the other extremely heartening part of what you mentioned is that this is probably the best sort of phase or era for the women workforce. And you also alluded to the fact that they have probably moved into that spiral or transitory kind of career development far earlier. You said almost a decade earlier than what men have. And I think that's probably great news, certainly great news for a social impact platform like ours, like WiT-ACE, which is completely focused on gender diversity and inclusion. So Sunita, I'll just quickly come to you. Where does guts fit in? Where does courage fit in? Because Debu has clearly, alluded to the importance of inference. I'm using that as the head, and emotion, which is the heart. So, the old adage of, you needed leaders who had guts. Where does that come in? Is that no longer an important skill?
I think there is space for all of it in my mind, Aniruddha. So, you need, and I wouldn't attribute courage or gut only to a male emotion, because, the way I look at it, courage is important. It's an important trait, which is expected from both genders. And I think it is a combination of head, heart, gut that you use in different circumstances. So I can think of innumerable times when you've kind of switched from one to the other, just depending on what that situation really demanded. So I think so long story short, I think there is space for all the three. I don't think either of them is on its deathbed anytime soon.
All right, that's good to know. That's heartening. Ramesh, what is your take? What do you think?
Courage, besides, I would say knowledge and skills are latent. I think then there are some differentiators, like we talked of mindset, right? Courage is an important element. That's what differentiates you. That's what helps you apply. And again, courage is not something which is, being oblivious of fear. It's being in the reality and taking the right steps of what's needed, standing up for what you believe in. And it's a very, very critical element. And I think it is more and more to be expected if one has to be part of driving or, making the change in the world. This is a very, very important element to possess and have.
Thank you. And Sunita, just to reiterate, and it is, I mean, but obvious that, courage is not, limited to, the males. I mean, courage is fundamentally gender agnostic, right?
Absolutely.
And of course, to an extent, to the point that Ramesh made, I mean, there is a linkage with fear. And, eventually courage is all about being able to overcome that fear, right? Put yourself in that situation and, sort of take it on, right? Now, whether you take it on with bravado or you take it on by using a combination of your head and heart is, I think, what will perhaps differentiate tomorrow's leaders from today's, because, there might have been stereotypical ways in which leaders demonstrated courage in the past. I think today they will be far more attuned to the several inferences that they are taking in, right, from a variety of sources. I'm just conscious of the time, and we might literally have come to the last sort of question. On the topic of skills, Debu, what about social skills, right? does that have any importance? What is your take, given, your consulting background and the fact that you're now actually consulting with several boards? What is your advice to all the women who are, watching us here today live, and there would be several thousands of them? What's your advice, particularly to women? What about social skills? And I guess it's equally true. Men may admit it a little lesser. We also need to imbibe social skills big time, in addition to what has already been spoken. So, Debu, what's your take?
So let me just connect it back to the discussion around courage as well.
Yeah.
I have been a leadership development consultant for over 20 years. And one of the playbooks that I keep telling a lot of my clients about is that the best leadership model that you can follow through is that of parenting. And specifically in parenting, you look at a mother, and that's your role model for leadership, taking a principle of leadership, which I call as tough love. Now, women are brilliant at tough love when it comes to parenting. So they will not spoil the child by being absolutely hands-off or spoiling them with love. They will do what is right for the child because they're invested in the future of as a parent. You take that and you bring it to boards, you bring it to corporates. When you lead teams, being tough, which demands that you act tough when things are not right, or which puts everybody at jeopardy and which is not acceptable, is a required leadership trait. To be a likable leader is probably the worst thing that you can aspire to do. Or to be a tough boss is also the worst thing that you can aspire to do. So if you really want a single message to women is that practice tough love and you'll be a great manager, you'll be a great leader. And that's the social skill of knowing what is right for the person. So it is called altruism, that what is good for the other person, you focus on that. Forget about what is good for you. And that comes naturally to women. I would love to debate anybody who disagrees with that. And they have the natural traits, they have the natural skills, and that's the best social skill to have. Tell me somebody who wouldn't want somebody to tell them what is good for them or what is right for them.
Wonderful. I'm just completely conscious of the fact that, we've probably come to the end of our time. On that note, I would like to thank each one of you for the precious time that you've spent with, with me and with our audience today, more importantly. So thanks a lot, Ramesh. Thank you, Sunita. Thanks a lot, Debu, for joining in and making this a wonderful experience, not just for me, but I said more importantly, for our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aniruddha. And you did an outstanding job of getting the answers from us as well. So thank you for that.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.